Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. First of all, I'm Maria Dimitrova, and I must apologize for two things. The timing. I mistakenly said our webinar would start an hour ago. And secondly, we experience technical issues with the connection. So if by any chance my presentation disappears, please allow us a couple of seconds or three to recover it. So this said, our webinar is going to take about 50 minutes today. And we'll be talking ISO 27001 information security. At some point, my colleague Tracy Hockey will join, hopefully. And I have here with me Caroline from our UK-based marketing team. Caroline, hi.
Hiya.
Yeah.
I'm here.
If anything happens, Caroline is going to take over. Her connection is much better, I hope.
I will. If we've got any technical problems, and as I said, our connection isn't great today from Maria's end, so we'll pop up and let you know that we're just trying to resolve it. So see you later. Bye.
See you later. Bye. Thank you. So let's talk about ISO 27001, which is the information security ISO standard. We all know that ISO standards bring in a series of benefits, as many as different organizations. Why? Because the reasons for implementing a management system, an ISO compliant management system, may vary from marketing purposes to third-party certification, all the way through maintaining your competitive edge, compliance with legal, statutory, or regulatory requirements, or general assurance to stakeholders such as customers and suppliers, but also the wider society and the authorities, that you not only comply with legal requirements, but go much further beyond what is strictly legal and work under the best internationally known practices. So, ISO 27001 is an ISO management system standard, and it shares the usual structure, which makes it easy to be integrated into already existent ISO management systems, such as quality management or environmental management, or to actually start building your ISO compliant systems with the 27001 ISO standard. So, hi Tracy.
Hi, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Just apologizing about being myself 1 hour late.
Tiny mix-up. It's quite all right.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Again, by mistake. I may be quite okay with an auditing system, but I'm very, very bad at arithmetics.
Quite all right. Things are.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm late. I was having difficulty with my access in, so sometimes these protections don't allow you to do things you'd like. So anyway, I'm here. So
you have just joined about my point around third-party certification, which I very much like to present as a huge benefit from ISO 27001, as you know.
Yeah.
So this said, let's carry on, basically because we're time limited today.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then we are talking about information security, and we've been talking about information security ever since the pandemic started, because it was when we actually realized how vulnerable we were. But it is not just the pandemic. And here we have a, unfortunately, not exhaustive list of anything that may heavily affect our resilience. And the latest thing that we actually added, Tracy, you and I, a few days ago, it was the great resignation issue the States and the UK are currently facing.
Yeah, it's seems to be a trend that is not subsiding. And anytime you have people who leave an organization, it always sets in motion things you need to do to protect corporate assets and ensure that you're not having a back door of some kind open and exposed to people who no longer should have access to company information. And that sometimes gets escaped, it sometimes gets delayed, and can lead to some pretty severe trappings for small organizations. So, something we wanted to bring to everybody's attention that needs to be a part of the exit strategy for people when they leave, to ensure that they're cycling what they need to in the information security. And again, if you have a standard like 27001 in place, a security management system, those things would be updated, and these things would become automatic as you drive those processes into the organization. So it's something you wouldn't necessarily forget. So it's a great thing to bring those to attention.
It did, and I saw the latest stats for US and the UK published up until September. Apparently, 3% of the workforce in the US have moved to another job, and over 1% here in the UK as well. So it's becoming quite an issue to every single organization.
Very much. And highly volatile situations. And I'm sure a lot of it is not, intentional, but there's a lot of unintentional exposures that can lead to the same causes, the same outcomes of items that are never any fun for a small business to deal with.
Indeed, and actually in small businesses, in small organizations, the unrepresented information, which is the name we technically give to the personal knowledge and professional knowledge of everyone, has always been the most vulnerable. So if we don't know how to protect it, we may be facing quite a lot of challenges. So let me show you, as an example, how ISO 27001 could actually help you out when it comes to identifying threats. It's just an example. I'm not saying that this is the right list on each side, but organizations may like to approach risk identification and assessment, classifying risks as direct and indirect. So what could be identified as a direct threat? Well, out-of-date information security policies, or changes in how we communicate about security, or the fact that we do not encrypt enough, or, for that matter, the fact that we may be encrypting too much. Why? Because different countries apply different regulations with regards to encryption. So in some countries, you may encrypt at a very low level, personal level encryptions. In other countries, that wouldn't be accepted or legal for that matter. So we classify threats as direct and indirect threats in order to get a better visibility on what we have within our organization, and most importantly, beyond our organization, because ISO management systems focus not only on what we have but on the wider, broader organizational environment, evaluating potential risks and opportunities coming from our stakeholders. So, this said, let's carry on. Let me just explain a bit the standard structure. It's a an ISO standard structure. That means it has 10 clauses, 1, 2, and 3 are standard specific and not relevant to our system, but clauses 4 to 10 are the ones we need to comply with if we implement an ISO 27001 compliant information security management system. So what's peculiar about this standard? Because if all standards have the same structure, they must differ in something. In this case, that will be Annex A. And Annex A is the part of the standard that gives us the controls that we can use to efficiently implement a flexible and robust and resilient management system. Currently, we have 14 sections with 114 controls. And now, because many people have asked about it, yes, it is going to change. And now, you don't need to rush into the change. Now, you don't need to postpone your ISO 27001 implementation. Right, Tracy?
Right. And I think the great thing about it is that the changes that I've been made aware of are positive in the fact that it reduces some of the redundancies that might be within the number of controls and activities that are within this. It collapses some of the most common things together, and so it reduces the number of controls that you have to prepare for, and it integrates some that are more common or traverse the same areas. So it tries to make it much more efficient and more structurally sound. So it's all positive impacting changes, but when, like anything else, when you have a standard and people are executing against those processes, you need to roll that out with caution and with a great deal of patience so that people can make the adjustments and achieve those things. So the standard as it exists today will be in existence for a number of years to come, but the process of offering the movement to the new structure will start to take shape sometime in mid-2022. So it's
indeed, changes to Annex A, I expected earlier, but the standard is going to be changed later on this year. And again, because the standard changes, we don't need to rush it, basically because, as Tracy says, there is no need to wait for the new standard to be published. It's going to be pretty much the same, but adapted to our new environment. So, and the annex actually, what changes, it is the guidance as well. And the guidance is a code of practice. It is not possible to certify against a code of practice. So we'll have to wait for ISO 27001 to be updated accordingly. And when that happens, it will remain possible to certify or recertify your management system against the current version for a prolonged period of time. Most likely, organization will need to update their systems before the next certification cycle, which is going to happen in more than 3 years. So please don't stop implementing 27001. That's not the purpose of the changes. So Tracy, many people get scared. They don't know how it works, so they say, "Oh yeah, we are going to wait for it." No, we can't wait for it.
This standard, more than almost any other standard is out there, helps establish better communications and a culture around awareness of what are the threats to the viability of an organization. And so it's very important that organizations really adopt these capabilities and look to the value of what it's adjusting as it goes forward, because the adjustments, again, like I said, are going to be valuable in the fact that they reduce the number of controls that you have to manage, and it puts more focus on some of the areas that have had some intense activities in. And so it's giving you more tools and more and some time back in implementation. So it's a great thing. But if you wait for those, you could end up waiting, another year or two and get more exposure to your business and those type of things. So it's much better to move forward with common plans of execution.
On top of that, currently only 37% of the controls are IT related. So as we say, it's a management system. It's about how we manage what we do rather than giving only technical solutions to our problems. This is why an ISO compliant system is so effective, because it does consider the technical side, but as part of a bigger, broader management system around our organization. This said, let's carry on. As I say, we're slightly time limited. So many people are scared about implementing and auditing, certifying their systems. Now, let's say that when we implement a system, we need to audit it internally. And in case we decide to certify it externally, it's going to be audited externally. So it is worth, I think, mentioning the 7 auditing principles, which guarantee that our system works. Those would be integrity and impartiality, fair presentation, due professional care, confidentiality, independence. We cannot be told what to say when arriving to a conclusion. We base our approach on evidence and on risk and opportunities assessment. So let's talk about a bit about the current controls and what we look at in a management system. First of all, that would be our policies. So how we approach a management system, starting with the policies, we should ask ourselves, do we have any policies? Are all the policies properly approved by management? Are they properly communicated to the employees? Do we review those? Do we review our policies at regular intervals, etc.? So that's a very interesting approach, and we should stick to it at any given moment. So how about organization of information security? Well, here we could ask several questions actually to get into that chapter. For instance, questions around information security roles and responsibilities. Are those identified and clearly defined, communicated to the relevant parties? Are all duties segregated? Do we know how to contact with the relevant authorities, local, national, international? Do we have information security implemented into our project management? Do we know how to handle our mobile device policies or teleworking policies, etc.? So ISO also covers human resources, which is something that many organizations neglect when dealing with security, right, Tracy?
Yeah, very
People
much.
say it's
Yep.
not applicable.
Right. Yeah, which is obviously 180 degrees from what it needs to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, a security management system in any size organization is first and foremost about the culture and the people.
Yeah.
Secondarily, it's about the hardware and software and other tools you can use to help mitigate the risks in the business. But the biggest risk is not to make your staffing aware of what is really necessary to manage what is important to the business, both for internal activities and for external. A lot of times we see employees and contractors who work for those employees don't understand the information security requirements for their partners and suppliers, for instance, and some of those areas. And so if you have a culture and a process built around that, that's contained again within a management system, you have the ability to ensure that those things are communicated in an appropriate fashion, updated, maintained, and absorbed through whatever means you can evaluate those capabilities. And that's what auditing does as well. So it's a good process to get into as a discipline for any business, but particularly around information security and such the heightened issues around it as we see today.
Yeah, we need to make sure that we have the right controls around screening, terms and conditions of employment, management responsibilities, awareness, education, training, disciplinary processes included, and termination or change of employment responsibilities. When changes are made, many organizations fail to do the right thing and review any potential impact. So this is why I have prepared in here another scenario for you guys to test how much you know about management systems. So here we have another scenario with 4 potential answers to what we should do. Now, just clarification, we are conducting an internal audit on our information security management system. So we are just looking at a different department. We'll leave it 2 minutes to read the scenario and make a decision on what action would you take if you were the internal auditor in charge with that department. Tracy, I think that we shall reveal the answers, the right answers, at the end of the session. What do you think?
Love it. That's a great way to do that. Let do this for a little bit and come to that conclusion. Be great.
Brilliant. So I think that people can also decide to change their mind throughout this presentation, because I think that we might be revealing some tiny answers, some tips that might help them identify the right answer. By the way, have you already picked up your answer to this one?
I have not, but in looking at it, I know which one it's supposed to be. So yeah.
You have been talking to our assessors team, haven't you?
Always.
Always.
I
know, they're so reliable.
Yeah.
I suspect they have prepared you for this session, haven't they?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, guys, I think that you have read the scenario and decided which one you would like to go with. At the end of the session, I'll pull up again this scenario in front of you, so to refresh what you see. And then let's talk about asset management. Asset management is important part of the controls of the Annex A. So what we need to focus in here, that would be inventory of assets, ownership of assets, acceptable use of assets, return of assets. Questions such as, is there a process in place to ensure all employees and external users return the organization's assets on termination of their employment contract or agreement, are the kind of questions that you should ask yourselves when working to implement an ISO compliant system. Same thing about classifying information. Do you have a policy? Do you have a process? Do you label your information? How do you handle your assets? How do you manage your removable media? Any policy, any process? Are those communicated to all employees and the stakeholders involved? How do you dispose of your media? How do you transfer media physically? Remember that physical still exists?
Yeah.
Because yeah, it does still exist. So we should think about physical handling as well. And this said, Audit Scenario 2, again, a practical case. We have 7 such scenarios. So a couple of minutes just to read through this scenario, pick up a potential answer, and we'll carry on because, as I say, we should be finishing in about 20 minutes. Tracy, do you have any suggestion, any comment you would like to make me aware of meanwhile?
Well, if we're talking specifically about these assets, it is an age-old problem by companies of all sizes.
Yeah.
In a past world, one of the sales roles I had, I ended up receiving the ownership of an account or two that were provided with some loaner equipment. And through the means of people leaving the roles and moving around and the length of the loaner being available to the client for a period of time, the company lost track of those assets. They weren't accounted for in a reasonable fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard as a beginning, but then with all the movement of people, it made it even harder, and there ended up being quite a liability on the book. That they were, because I was the owner of the account, was going to get charged back for it. So we had to go on some hunts, and find assets in companies that were quite, were old but needed to be found so we could account for them, right? It was one of the most intense investigational things I've ever done, because some of these assets were 4 or 5 years old, and people had given them to their grandkids and stuff in some cases, and it was an interesting process. But my point is that companies do have to account for these things, especially if they have any semblance of being in the public domain. And it's a very difficult thing to do. So this is a very cornerstone activity for any size company. And if you're smaller and have less people and fewer assets, it's better to get a process started and understand what you need to do with that process before you execute further and get larger, and it becomes out of control sometimes. So it's a great.
Absolutely. I agree, and it links nicely to access control. So assets and access are linked. So what we need to identify is exactly what you say, how to manage assets and access to systems and assets as well. So this said, cryptography is another one. This issue is largely known and linked to cryptocurrency, but it's not the only thing you need to think about. It's all about policies, management controls, and we need to make sure that we have a policy on the use of cryptographic controls, and we have a policy governing the whole life cycle of our cryptographic keys. So when we talk cryptography, we're not talking cryptocurrency. We're talking our day-to-day activities, transferring information, etc., etc. So there we go with Audit Scenario 3. to cover exactly what we've been discussing, guys. So a couple of minutes for you to read through. I shall say that we have 3 audit scenarios in a row now. I hope those scenarios help, Tracy.
Oh yeah, they're very good. They just help identify and point out, some areas that sometimes don't maybe get glossed over, and this just helps sharpen that attention to some of the key points. And so I like these audit scenarios that you're going through are good reminders of just sharpening your understanding of what needs to take place.
Well, as I promised, I did something hands-on ISO. So as we all know, ISO standard, ISO related webinars may be really tough to academics from time to time. So I just said, look, let's do it hands-on, the good way.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that people might have read the scenario. Let's go for scenario 4. So now we're talking pharmaceutical. Okay, that's pharmaceuticals. It is quite big these days, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, sometimes we think of the different areas of the business that where you have scientists in this case that are working with the use of technology and supporting their business, and who really owns the responsibility for ensuring the right assets are modeled, are managed, and accounted for, and who has access to those things. And that's very critical. And so involving the organizations both on the technical side and the user side in that decision process is part of what a security management system does and ensures.
Because before I move to the next one, I'll give some spoiler alert that the right answer here would most certainly shock many people. But anyway, the right answer at the end of the session. So audit scenario 5, training. A training institute offering services of information security, etc., etc. So let's say what we're discovering here. By the way, as I said at the beginning, I pulled some statistics out on the US and the UK. I was quite amazed to see that 3% of the people in the US moved the job up until September, 1% in the UK. That's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, very much.
Very much. It's concerning. I hope this trend doesn't persist for too long.
Well, yeah, I would agree. It's in raw numbers here in the United States. It's they identified there was 4.4 million people in September that resigned and moved on, as they call it. And I'm sure there's they have a definition of all the different accountabilities. But the challenge is that what the pandemic has done is put focus light, a big harbor light on how activities go on in a business, and how you need to treat workers, and workers need to be, where they can do their work at, and how it can be leveraged without having to be all huddled in the masses in one location. So it's a change in perception, and that identification of how things can be done without so much oversight, but also with some creativity, is an interesting change in what's going on in the management of activities, I think. So it's, it's causing a lot of that. I think there's a cause and effect will eventually sort itself out, but it is affecting how business gets done, particularly around information security, I think. And so that's why it's a good topic to bring up at this point.
Indeed, and we are back to what we said at the beginning. Physical and environmental security is becoming again an issue. So it is considered within the standard, heavily considered, and it helps companies, it helps organizations have a better look on what they need to do. So here we go with another scenario. So we are again conducting an internal audit. I might have failed to mention that all scenarios here have been on internal auditing at the moment. Okay, so let's get physical with that one.
Well, this is a great point again, where sometimes in conversations with prospects and clients, they think that that the information security standard can be handled purely by their IT organization. And they don't always, IT is more of the electronic and world, the bits and bytes that travel around, and not always in the physical side of things. So just the physical, accountability of buildings and things you have in your business, other assets, is important to be able to handle. And a lot, again, goes back to that it's a human involvement issue. It's not necessarily a technology based issue that just needs to be, again, connected in to the entire elements of a management system. So it's important to understand that those implications.
Absolutely. And here comes our next slide on operation security, because everything you just told us is clearly what we need to consider. And from only a technical solution point of view, it wouldn't be ideal if we pretend to use only technical solutions. We need the management side of our activities to be okay, to be all right, to be well implemented and controlled in order to make it work. So, audit scenario 7, that would be the last audit scenario for today. And this time, we are accompanying an external auditor. Please read the scenario through and let us know at the end of the session, well, what do you think the external auditor would do in this case? Okay, there we go. That was a short one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Communication security, we need to be completely clear about communications. What shall we talk here about? Well, everything around network control, security of network services, information transfer policies and procedures, agreements on information transfer, electronic messaging, confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements, all those need to be absolutely well developed within what we do within our system. So, Tracy, anything you might like to add in here?
Well, I not completely. You've said some good things there. I think the key thing here is, again, that it identifies all the places and where you may have some exposures, and especially in the social media world, where there are so many applications that open up back doors into the organization. And so having that understood about how to deal with that is an important ingredient. And I like what this is intended to do.
Brilliant. Let's move on then. And here we go. System acquisition, development, and maintenance. It is also considered within the standards and cover with several standards. It's going to persist in the new one as well, so no reason to postpone any implementation. Tracy, you mentioned supplier relationships. Now, there are two objectives, but you have no idea how many controls currently, and all those controls are going to be kept in a reliable form within the new Annex A next year. So information security incident management, very important. We need to ensure that we have a consistent, robust, effective, flexible approach to how we manage our security incidents, including, obviously, how we communicate when we have weaknesses or security breaches or any security-related events. Communication is essential. So business continuity is part of Annex A as well, business continuity within information security aspects of the organization. So there are quite a lot of common points between ISO 22301 and 27001 with regards to information security. Control I-17 within the current Annex A is the most relevant. So it allows us to ensure availability of information, of policies for information processing or information security continuity, and that it is actually embedded in our organization. So the last section in the annex, in the current annex, that's compliance. And it's really important to mention that ISO 27001 is not a static checklist that helps us just tick off what we have to do. It's a dynamic management system that allows us to identify at any given moment what we are expected to do. And most importantly, if we start failing to be there, that level that we are expected to be, the system is gonna make us aware of that potential weakness and make us rectify as soon as possible. So this said, Tracy, do you like to add anything before we go to our
Q&A?
Q&A and scenario solutions?
No, I think it's been a very good, easy process to understand all of the connected areas. And I think the last section regarding communication and its integration components with, compliance and other outside organizations you need to make sure you're talking to is always a good business practice when you're doing that with, you're never in this alone, and you have to make sure that what you're working on is well connected to the outside world. I do know that there has been business that has been won and lost based on relationships that have either accelerated and been protected or have been not protected and business lost because organizations have been careless with some of that. So it's a very easy thing to forget that it isn't in your house, so you don't have to worry about it. But I think these things are really highlighted in a management system, and 27001 has done a phenomenal job in being able to pull that together and put some organization to it. And with the help of IMSM for organizations to implement this, they can get ahead of the curve and be out there in front of their competition with great services and processes. So with that, I'll let you get into the scenarios. I see a lot of chatter about how they're progressing with it. So look forward to it.
Yeah. Okay, Tracy, shall we resolve our scenarios? I brought the first one on the screen. So I suspect that most of you guys have said that the right answer would be answer D. So unfortunately, you would be mistaken if you selected answer D, because I know why you have selected that one, because it looks like the questionnaires completed and the surveys have been biased. Correct, Tracy? That's the idea the scenario gives, isn't it?
Yes.
However, we can't be sure. The standard doesn't tell us how to structure our surveys. It says that we need to train our people, we need to keep it documented, but it depends on us. So if I decide that it is biased and I file a nonconformity, actually I am the biased one.
Right.
So the right answer here, my suggestion, would be further investigation. So why not documenting conformity? Because it is either it either conforms or not. We don't document it. We just accept that it's okay. Why it is not B? Because remember the auditing principles. We should be impartial, so we can't recommend anything. If we don't know why exactly we document a non-conformity, we are actually not complying with requirements for us as auditors,
Right.
to be impartial, to be independent, to fairly present everything. So investigate further. You don't know, guys. Someone might just decide to design a survey to make people feel good, and that's a completely acceptable purpose, isn't it?
Very much.
So, very much. Auditing scenario 2, conducting internal audit, and it's the disposal of a failed and redundant IT equipment. So, thanks to everyone that has documented option D, which is the correct one. I bet quite a lot that you don't know why. Okay, I'll tell you something. Again, we can't recommend an action of improvement. We can always, if we're not sure, we can always go with investigating further. That's a viable solution if we're not sure. Guys, very important, when you audit your information security management systems, or any ISO management systems for that matter, and you're not sure about the right answer, you can't let it go as a conformity, because that wouldn't be good. You can't be sure if it is a non-conformity, and if you go for non-conformity, you're liable for what you do. So you go for investigating further. And when you do it, you'll see eventually that it is either all good or there is a flaw. Again, don't go for a non-conformity if you are not 100% sure and you don't know why you're doing it, because that's not good. And here there is only one word that suggests a non-conformity, although clear non-conformity, and that only word would be company's licensed operating system.
Mm-hmm.
If there were not that word in there, no problem at all, it's all good. Okay, so please send through your comments on social. We'll be answering all of them eventually, but yeah, happy to discuss all these scenarios further. Okay, small company, 40 people. They offer commercial insurance broker services, and all data of insured clients are stored electronically on a data server to which all the personnel have access. NDAs are signed by insurance brokers. Conformity or non-conformity? Oh, none of those. So apparently, I'm not confident with conformity. As an auditor, I wouldn't be. There's something that doesn't seem quite okay. I may not be quite okay with strict non-conformity straight away. So what do? I investigate further. However, uh, some may decide to document non-conformity straight away. That would be quite risky, but I can see the point. However, I would go with investigating further for one reason. The HR manager shows the NDAs. I know that all the personnel have access to the server. However, the HR manager assures the auditor that nobody else in the company reads the data of the insured clients. Before I go for a non-conformity here, I would make sure the HR manager can actually prove it. Because if he can, let's say there's some procedures, some technical solutions that prevent all the users from having access to the data, we would be all good, wouldn't we? So yeah, I tend to think that finally it's going to be non-conformity. I can't know it, but let's have a doubt about it for a second. Let's investigate further. Why? Because we should be the first people in there not biased. We should avoid our own bias, which is fairly very difficult. But at least we can try, can't we? Large pharmaceutical company. Okay, thank you everyone that have mentioned D, document non-conformity with the standard. You're wrong. Why? Okay, indeed, the research fellow's laptop was found connected to a local Wi-Fi hotspot supported by an encrypted open provider. The research fellow mentioned that such connectivity does not affect the department and can be stopped at any time. Okay, we must be independent. We can't take the research fellow's opinion, so obviously we are not just skipping it. That's not okay. We can't recommend anything because we're impartial. It doesn't seem too okay for us, but guys, have we checked the policies? We haven't. Imagine that in the policy there is something that allows the fellow, actually, he has read the policy, he knows that there is a paragraph saying that personal use out of the office under certain circumstances, it is allowed. At the end of the day, it's an encrypted provider. So for my sake and everyone's sake, we wouldn't document non-conformity before investigating further. I would like to review policies, etc., documentation, to make sure that if I document non-conformity, I'm right to do it. Okay? Don't be biased. Keep your mind open. 5. Training institute offering service of information security, design, etc., etc. So, we have a third-party auditing here. Sorry, my mistake during the session. And we see that students, when signing up for the course, they sign a declaration stating that they have no objections for their personal details to be on the company-owned server. Thank you, everyone who might have moved, that might have decided to say that investigating further is the best option here. It's a good option indeed. But this time, I would go straight away for what? A nonconformity. Why? The students are okay with their data stored on a company-owned server. However, during the interview, the auditor discovers that the personal data of the students are stored electronically in a what? Public available server. That's not conformant with what they have documented. Okay? Right. 6, internal audit. Again, facility management department in your organization that provides and maintains office space and facilities. That's all physical. So here we have a scenario which kind of seems, on the one hand, very okay. It's all well documented. On the other hand, it doesn't look quite all right, does it, Tracy?
No.
No, either the standard is not as good as we all claim it is, or there is something we haven't seen in this scenario. Okay, you can always investigate further. That's it. That's a viable option, isn't it? We have no too much experience. We need to investigate further. As long as we declare it as a nonconformity at the end of our investigation, we will be all good. Why is it a nonconformity? And this is a tricky one. It hasn't come up during the training, so I'm letting you know immediately. Risk assessment. ISO 27001 is all about risk assessment and many other things around, but risk assessment is essential. It's critical, and no risk assessment has been carried out when the change has produced itself. So this is why it's a straightforward nonconformity. Risk assessment, guys. Anytime, everywhere, all the time, all departments, everything must be assessed. And assessed against both risks and opportunities. Why? Because risk, fortunately, entail opportunities, and opportunities, unfortunately, lead to some risks that we need to manage. And ISO 27001 tells us how. Okay, Allsec Products Ltd is a consulting company. That's going to be our latest scenario. They provide IT security solutions involving the planning, advice, project management, implementation, etc. So in the data center, the auditor discovered that there was no written procedure or written instruction for the operation of the backup. What do you think the auditor should have done? Document it or not? A nonconformity or investigating further? Well, according to the standard, we must have, that's critical, a backup policy, a backup procedure. The standard, however, doesn't specify that it should be written. Okay, again, before I commit to documenting a nonconformity, I would heavily investigate further. So, better safe than sorry. When you have a doubt, always investigate further. And it is not only applicable to when you decide if it is a nonconformity. If you have a doubt about a nonconformity, it applies even when you have a doubt about if it is a conformity. Even when it looks all good, but there is that little thing in there that says, But I'm not quite sure, however. Please investigate further. Better safe than sorry. This said, I'm completely aware of the fact, Tracy, that we need to let Caroline go.
Yeah.
Caroline, could you please take over? Sorry about that.